guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna make a cute little summer dress, which I'm super excited about, and we're gonna use a technique that I've shown I think once before, which is a technique that involves draping, and we're basically gonna draw on our bodice or our dress that we're gonna make onto our bust right here, and then just drape our pattern onto it to have an easier time and to just have it, you know, already designed on the mannequin without having to make a base block and then, you know, draw on the shape and so on. So I think that's a really nice technique for this. And I'm really excited to show you this technique. I hope you enjoy, and let's go. For this technique, we're gonna use something like this. So this is a very thin tailor's tape. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but I'm gonna put the name right here so that you can have a look. We're gonna draw this bodice right here. So we're gonna make this dress today, which is a really cute summer dress. I'm gonna use voile for this, silk and viscose voile, which is something similar to organza, but it just looks way more elegant in my opinion. This is the fabric that I'll be using today, and this is see-through, so that's one thing about voile. As you can see right here, it's very see-through. So we're gonna use another layer on the bodice right here to make it not transparent, obviously. And then also we're gonna put lining in here and make this dress really fluffy with the skirt and have little small puff sleeves. And yeah, basically exactly the same what you can see right here. So let's make this dress. So I'm going to use this tape right here to draw on the shape of the bodice that I want to make. So I have a pretty low cleavage right here, which is I think about here. And then I'm doing like this kind of shape right here, which goes then back up to around here, where I'm then gonna have a corner from this point on. I'm gonna go down towards the back, and I'll have a zipper in the back. So I think it'll look really cute if I have a V down here. This falls below the bust line, which is right here. So you'll have to wear this braless, which for me personally is not a problem, or just, you know, one without a backing like this. The cups will be starting around here. I'll make them a bit smaller than this cup right here, just for the aesthetic. Okay, if I look at this right now, it looks too long and not wide enough in my opinion. So I want to change this a tiny bit. And as I'll have sleeves, I want them to start right here in the point from the cup. So I can do something like this, and it's just gonna end somewhere here. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do the sleeve part right here, because there's this big kind of triangle here. Maybe I'm just gonna, you know, attach it to over here somewhere, just with an elastic. Not sure how I'm gonna do this. Maybe I'm just gonna add it to this part right here, but that's also not that important right now. The shape of the cup right here is important now, and also what I want to do with my seams here. So I know that I want to have a dividing seam here in the cup that goes in a diagonal way down to the waistline. I want to have another dividing seam somewhere here that also goes in a diagonal way towards the waistline. And then I'm gonna have another one maybe coming from up here going down. I don't want to have this one in the cup just because this is gonna be a hassle to braid, so I'm not gonna do that. And then I'm gonna ignore the side seam because we don't really need that for this pattern, and just divide the back piece and have a straight one right here, and then the center back with the zipper. that goes also down into the skirt part. And now that all of the lines are done, I can go ahead and drape with my draping fabric. So for draping, I'm going to use my cotton canvas that I have for this purpose, which is my tryout fabric. This one is really, really see-through, which is good in this case because you can obviously see the lines through. Like mock-up fabrics are lightweight enough that you can see the black stripes through. So what I'm gonna do here is basically just putting it with the grain parallel to the center front and just pinning it in place, and then just wrapping it around following the widest point, which is in my case the bust, because my hip line is gonna get cut off. And now I can basically just form these shapes that I made with my fabric. And then once everything lays flat on my dress form, I can draw out the shapes that I designed beforehand. And I'm also adding like all of the different points, like the under bust seam right here, and then the waistline is obviously where we're going to stop it, and then also the bust line right here. And I'm going to name this. So this here is the center front, and this is the, let's just call it seam number 1. So I'm just going to say S1. Up here is the cup, so that I know afterwards how to put this piece together. And what I'm doing right here, just because I want to have as minimal fabric used up as possible, is trying to put this, maybe I'm gonna do the cups afterwards, but for the underbust parts right here, I can just fold it over to the side so that I also have a flat surface again, and then also pin these down exactly as I did for the front piece, and also draw out the shape. For the cup pieces, I'm actually gonna cut off where I drew the cup seam so that I can use a separate pattern piece and I don't have any fabric in the way. And I think actually I can use this piece that I just cut off for at least the side cup piece. And then I'm just gonna make another one for this side because it lays pretty nice and flat on here. Okay, and now I can use this piece right here to shape the cup. If this is enough, maybe I need to use another one. I think this is enough. And I'll just do exactly the same as I did for the other pieces. And I'm also gonna put a notch in here because there is a dividing seam in here. And that is all of the pattern pieces. So now I can take it off and transfer it to paper, and then also you know, measure everything and clean everything up in case it's not clean enough yet, and then I can make a pattern out of it. Okay, so I prepared everything now, which looks like this, and I decided, just because I got it in actually today, I received a package with cup foam. So I decided to use that for my cups right here. I already put the 2 cup pieces together as a tryout. I'm gonna show you how I did that with the other side in just a second. But basically I cut out the cup pieces without seam allowance, just as they are, and did a zigzag stitch right here to put these together edge to edge, and it seems to have worked out quite well, honestly. It also doesn't bulk or anything, so I'm quite happy with the shape and how it looks and so on. So I'm gonna do that with the other side as well and show you how it looks like. And yeah, then we can start and put everything together. The first thing is, for all of the pieces that have a interlining, you want to put the fashion fabric, in my case this rose fabric right here, together with the interlining, and you do that by just stitching into the seam allowance all around so that they are basically one layer and can be used as a one, because you're gonna line it anyways, so all of the seam allowances will be, as per usual, hidden in between the outer layer that includes the fashion fabric and the interlining, and the lining that is just, you know, in my case, this white fabric. which is, by the way, just a lightweight cotton canvas that I'm using, cotton poplin, I think it is. And yeah, so that's what I'm gonna do right now, and prepare all of these pattern pieces and put them together to form one layer. And I'm gonna show you how this is done. So I'm gonna start off with my cups up here because I frankly just want to try out how it looks with my cup foam. So I'm just gonna put right sides together of my outer and inner cup and close the cup seams on both sides, and then press the seam allowance open so that I can then put it on this and see how it looks. I'm going to press this open using my tailor's ham. So I can put this like right here at the edge of my tailor's ham and then press it open with a little bit of steam. Just make sure not to burn yourself with the steam. And this makes a really nice pressed seam right there. I'm going to cut into the seam just to avoid the wrinkles that it's giving the fabric right now, just to give it a little bit of ease. And it's just gonna look nicer on the outside. And that's the cup piece. This one goes in here. And I hope that it's gonna look really nice. I am just gonna very, very lightly put a bar tag like into the seam allowance still, like up here and down here as well, just so that the cup foam stays in place. As I didn't put any seam allowance, I have to be careful with that to not get the bar tag into the actual piece, but that should be a problem. Yeah, that's what it's gonna look like. I'm really excited about that. Obviously, you don't need a cup foam for that. You can just not use one, or you can reuse an old bra that you cut to the size of this pattern piece or these pattern pieces. So let's do the other one as well, and then we're gonna put the bodice together. So to put the bodice together, all of the seams have specific names. So you just need to put right sides together of the seams with the same names, basically. And you're gonna end up with one bodice. The zipper is gonna be in the center back, so leave that one open for now. So for the front piece, for example, the center front and the middle front piece, we're gonna put the right sides together to close the front dividing seam 1. Right here, and then we're also gonna iron the seam open and continue doing that until we reach the last piece, which is the center back piece right there, and then we're gonna have one long bodice. So before we're gonna sew the cups in, I want to add boning to at least all of the dividing seams that I have in this bodice. And then also on top of that, I drew in another placement for boning in the back piece that I want to add as well. And I'm gonna add one next to the zipper. And I'm gonna use Ridgeline boning for this, which is stitchable boning, so you don't need any tunnels or anything for that, which is obviously also fine. If you don't have Ridgeline boning, you can always just use some sort of encasing that you're just gonna stitch onto the seam allowance here. Or also, if you want to do that, you can use more seam allowance than 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters. That would be the case, and use that as the tunnel for boning. Whatever way you choose. Also, adding no boning is fine, I guess. It's just gonna be less sturdy and it might wrinkle up a bit. but I'm going to use Ridgeline boning, and I'm going to put it right on top of my dividing seams, and then also going to add where I mentioned a second ago. So I am done with the bodice now, or like with putting the bodice pieces together. I also added this decorative stitching, if you can see, or right here, that I just did with a setting on my sewing machine. It just looks really, really cute in my opinion. It's just on top of the boning channel, just to emphasize this a bit more, I guess. And now I can put the cups into the cup seams right here, and we can go from there. So let's put right sides together, match up all the notches and all of the seams. You find all of the names of the specific notches and seams on the pattern pieces respectively, and then you can put these in their position. Okay, once this is done, I don't know how to feel about this. I have to see it on, basically, but there's a lot of flowers in here and there's no except for this, and I'm not sure how to feel about this, but it might also look really nice. I don't know. I'm going to iron the seam allowance into the cup because it looks so nice from the outside. When this seam right here folds towards the inside, it just looks way nicer than the other way around. Obviously, you want to shorten your boning, or like you generally don't want to have boning in your seam allowance at all. Therefore, you want to take that out. And I'm just gonna try to iron everything as nice as possible into the cups. So I decided that I want to have some ruffles up here over the bust, and for that I cut out a strip that is 4 centimeters wide, which I'm then going to iron in half all the way. And now I'm also going to ruffle this. I am going to ruffle into the seam allowance at around 5 millimeters using my ruffle foot. You can obviously ruffle by hand, just stitch with your widest stitch. Don't back tack, and then you can pull on the bobbin thread and it's going to ruffle as well. And I'm gonna have the folded side be visible in the end. So this is my seam allowance at the raw edge. I'm going to ruffle at 5 millimeters. I want to have ruffles going into this corner right here. So what I'm going to do for that is just fold this towards the inside like this. And then put this where the seam ends at 1 centimeter seam allowance. And then just guide it all around the upper seam right here. And here I'm gonna fold it again, and I'm gonna cut it here. And then just stitch into the seam allowance. So the bodice for now is done, so we can put this aside and we can start with the sleeves. The sleeves are just the silk, no lining obviously in this, because we want to see the arm underneath. And I'm gonna cut off the elastic that I wrote here for the shoulder and then also for the upper arm in size S, and then work with these two. So for the sleeves, I am folding a tunnel. So basically I'm folding down the sleeve 2 times so that afterwards I can put an elastic through right here, and I'm gonna stitch it down right here closely to the edge, and I'm going to do that all the way to the other side, and then also for the hem of the sleeve. Okay, so now that everything is prepared, we can put the elastics through and then close the side seam of the sleeves with a French seam, which means you put the wrong sides together of the fabric first, stitch at 1 centimeter or at 5 millimeters, that's what I'm gonna do, and cut off the seam allowance and then fold it back to right sides meeting each other, and then stitching again so that you're gonna have like a kind of tunnel that encloses the seam allowance, and then it looks really neat from the inside as well. As this is see-through fabric, you obviously want to manufacture it in the nicest way possible, so that's why I am choosing French seams. Obviously, if you don't want to have this hassle or you don't have a transparent fabric, you don't need to do that. You can just simply use your overlock or whatever to clean up the edges, but I'm gonna do French seams. So now that both sleeves are done, I already turned this side over so that the seam lays on the inside. That is what it looks like. I am going to attach the sleeves once everything is done right here so that the side seam matches up with this seam right here, which is the front dividing seam 3. And I'll do that with a bar tag once everything is complete, just because I don't have any seam allowance to attach it to the bodice as of right now. Once we're done with that, now we can continue with the lining of the bodice, and the lining of the bodice is exactly the same as the outer fabric, just without all of the boning, and it has a few less pieces because in my pattern I already took out a few seams that I was able to, so less work. And I'm gonna put this together right now, and I'll be back once the lining is done. So now that my lining is also sewn together, as you can see, it basically looks the same as the upper part, just without the foam and without all of the boning, and then also the back piece is just one whole piece. I can now go ahead and put these 2 layers together. I do that by just putting right sides together, and I'm going to stitch the upper side close. So I'm going to match up everything, all of the seams and all of, everything basically. And since I have this gathering, like this ruffle on the upper edge, I make sure to really be careful while sewing, because I only want to stitch 1 centimeter inwards. So like I just wanna, be really careful to stitch right on my stitching line, because the ruffles will be smaller or bigger depending on where you stitch. So I want to be really, really exact and really careful not to, lose any ruffles. And then I also make sure to have all of the seam allowances pointing in the direction that I ironed it. And you're gonna find that the lining is a tiny bit smaller than the outer fabric. That's how it's supposed to be, because the lining just needs to sit on the inside, and it's not supposed to point to peek through in any way. That's why the lining usually, or also facings, are smaller than the outer fabric. It just makes it not show on the outside. And you're gonna find notches all over the back part right here that need to match up with all of the seams. And then obviously you want to match up the center back. And we're gonna put a zipper in here, so we're not gonna do anything to this yet. Also, you want to, obviously I should have done that before as well, you want to have this seam allowance here without boning. I put boning in there because I'm smart. So I'm quickly gonna take out the boning after I've sewn. So it's attached now, and we're gonna cut down the seam allowance so that we can sew it together more easily. I'm gonna cut it down to around 5 millimeters. And once I reach the corners, right here for example, I am going to cut it down even more. And once I'm coming towards this corner here in the center front, we have to cut down the seam allowance pretty drastically, because this corner right here, if you don't cut into it, you won't be able to fold the bodice basically, or like turn it inside out. So let's see how this goes. So let's see if we can turn this over, you know. So especially like right here in the center front, it's gonna be harder. And I'm also gonna back stitch this seam so it looks really nice now. As you can see, it lays really nicely. And I'm gonna back stitch the seam here as well so that all of this lays nicely, because otherwise you're probably gonna have this bulk right there all the time. So you want to really stitch it down like this, and you do that by stitching the seam allowance onto the lining. That's called back stitching. And that's what I'm gonna do right now. So I backstitched the seam right now, and now I can try to turn it over nicely and take out all of the ruffles right here. And then I'm also gonna iron it, of course. So once down here, this is, you know, sewn together with the skirt and everything, it's gonna pull down the lining as well, but I also want to just iron it in place to make it easier. So I quickly went ahead and tried on my bodice that I finished, and I'm really excited. It looks really nice in my opinion. One thing I did, also ignore the red here, I had a pimple right there, whatever. So one thing I did was put some padding in this cup right here. I didn't put it in here because I felt like it needed it. It kind of looked from the outside, you can still kind of see it, how it's like going outwards, and I don't really like it. So I just cut out these foam pads from an old bra that I'm not using anymore, and I just put it in here, so now you can see the difference. I don't actually know if you can see it on camera. In person, there is quite a big difference because, you know, it pushes it to fill out more and it looks better. But still, I'm not quite happy with how this just folds outwards. So I was thinking about adding some wire that might just sit in here so that I can just push it towards the inside. And for that, I am going to add a tunnel to the inside of the outer layer that I'm just going to hand stitch in place, where I can put this inside and fix in place so that I have something to, you know, push it onto my body, because it looks really cute, but this just, I don't know. I don't like how this just falls outwards. Yeah, but apart from that, I'm really happy. This also looks really nice just as a top, so if you want to do that, just leave out the skirt and you're good to go. I'm really happy so far, so let's continue. Let's finish this dress. So now that my bodice is basically complete, we can just bar tack the sleeves onto the positions right here. I already said that before. Just match up the side seam of the sleeve with the front dividing seam 3 and just put a bar tack right there and it should be fine. Also the same on this side right here, and then the bodice is complete. Then we can continue with the skirt. The skirt is made up of a few layers, or not a few layers, but a few selvage to selvage strips of fabric right here. I cut off 3 strips for the voile, for the silk, and then only 1 out of the lining fabric. So to do the skirt, I'm just gonna put all of these layers together to make one long layer. I'm gonna do that with French seams as well, just to have everything neat and tidy on the inside, which means that I'm gonna put wrong sides together here at the selvage edges, and so right there. Then I'm gonna cut off the seam allowance to about 5 millimeters, 3 millimeters, and then turn it right sides together and stitch again so that I'll have the encasing of the seam allowance. I'm going to do that to all of them so that I have one long strip for the skirt before gathering it. So next up, I am going to hem my skirt. I'll be doing that with folding my hem in 5 millimeters twice and then top stitching just as I usually do. I'm going to use my hemming foot for this, as this is really good fabric for that, and it's just a straight line. But obviously you can do it manually as well, even though I think it's a really good investment to have a hemming foot like that, especially for me, as I'm doing that quite a lot. So that's what I'm gonna do for the silk, and then also for my lining right here. This is just one layer, or like not one layer, but one panel, and then we're gonna ruffle everything. So now we're gonna ruffle both the lining and also the outer layer. I'm gonna do that with my ruffling foot. Of course, you can do that without it. I think I've said it so many times already. You just need to stitch into the seam allowance with your biggest stitch without back tacking on either end. And then once you pull on one of the 2 threads, I usually use the bobbin thread for that, you gather your fabric, and you're just gonna gather it to the length of your waistline right here, both of these, so the lining and also the big panel for the outer fluffy skirt part. You're both gonna gather these to fit the length of the waistline right here on the bodice. So now we're going to put the outer layer onto the outer layer of the bodice. As they are still apart, we can still do that. And then the lining layer also onto this one, the lining layer of the bodice. Make sure that all seam allowances face inside of the bodice. So you want to put right sides together for everything. And also, obviously, that you have the correct side of your hem facing towards the inside. So you want to have where the folding goes inwards, obviously, you want to have that on the inside, both for the lining and also for the outer layer. They need to face each other. Sorry, my camera just died. My microphone is on that camera because it's too hot, that camera. Sorry about that. So basically you need to make the both of these face each other so that they're hidden on the outside. So you want to have on the inside the nice side, and then obviously also on the outside the nice side. And I made mine a tiny bit too long. I should have gathered a tiny bit more, but that's fine. I'm just gonna cut the rest off. But I'm just gonna put right sides together like so, and then without the lining layer. So these 2 layers on, and then this one right here, right sides together. Sew this onto the lining layer with everything still being open. So this should have 2 layers in the end just falling down. So the last thing that we're gonna do is putting the zipper in, and that just works the usual way. You know the drill already. I have a small little zipper. This is 25 centimeters, and I'm gonna open this up and then put right sides together with my top layer right here, and just place the plastic stopper just at the corner of my top layer. And then from there, I am working my way downwards, making sure all of the seam allowances lay the correct way that I want it to lay. For example, here I want it to lay down into the skirt. And then here I have a little bit more seam allowance because I have the selvage edge right here. So I'm just gonna place it straight down, coming from this corner right here, and just have a bit more seam allowance that I'm gonna cut off in the very end until I reach the beginning of the zipper. And then I'm gonna sew this in with my zipper foot. So this is what it looks like. Gonna lay it like this in the very end. And I'm gonna close the zipper and be very careful with the silk, as it's a very, very light fabric and it can be ripped easily. And I'm gonna mark with needles things like this dividing seam, so like the waistline. I'm also gonna mark where I stopped sewing, because that's where I want to stop sewing on the other side as well. And then this up here is just where the plastic stopper basically is. So with these 2 markings, I should be able to easily transfer the placement of this to the other side, right here. So this right here marked the waistline. And the same thing goes to this side right here. I just have a tiny bit more seam allowance, which is why I'm gonna use the same straight way down towards the end of the zipper to pin it and not make a weird curve outwards. And then I'm also just gonna pin it up towards the corner up here. And this should also be just where the fold is going to end up being. Now I'm going to stitch this. So I just quickly turned it right sides out to see how the zipper looks and if everything matches up. And as you can see right here, this is matching up well, and up here it also looks really nice. So we can continue and put the lining in place now. So for that, you want to turn everything wrong sides out, if possible. I have the wire in here now. Maybe I need to open my dress up. So basically you want to have this fold right here, fold downwards onto the zipper, and then just follow along the zipper band, match up all of the seams as well. In this case it's just the waist seam, but you still want to match these up. Also check that the seam allowance is facing the right way, and then just go down all the way until you reach the end of the zipper. So for me it's about here. And then just stitch down here You can use a one-sided foot for that, that's probably the easiest, and repeat the same thing on the other side as well. And this is what it looks like. And now the remaining hem needs to be closed as well. As you can see, it's still open down here. So I will just be putting right sides together of my lining and sew this close, and then also do the same for my upper fabric. And I think since I have a lot of seam allowance, I am just gonna fold the seam allowance inwards and top stitch it again so that it's also hidden nicely and I don't have any raw edges, or in this case any salvage edges, just on the inside. I don't want that. So I'm gonna stitch here and then here as well. Well, that's it already for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I am super in love with the dress and I'm gonna reveal it to you obviously at the end of this video. If you are interested in the pattern, there is of course a link down below to the pattern itself on my Etsy store. That's also the most direct way to support me and to keep videos just like this going, as they are a lot of work. And yeah, so thank you so much. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button down below and ring the bell so you'll get notified every time that I post. I post on Sundays, so you can keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, go check out my Instagram. I am posting lots of reels with useful tips and tricks that you might want to check out as well. Link is also down in the description below. It's just the same handle as here on my YouTube, so if you haven't followed me there yet, you should definitely do that. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I am gonna take a break now. It was a tough 2 days of sewing this, as I have to prepare a bit for next week's vacation. Oh yeah, I'm on vacation next week. There won't be a new video next Sunday, so in 2 weeks time we're gonna see each other again and I'm super excited. I can't wait to show you what I have planned for that Sunday. So definitely follow me on my Insta for Greece stories, like seaside and hot weather and beach and whatnot. I am super excited. I can't wait. I definitely need a vacation. It's been a long time, so I'm gonna see you on my Instagram stories or in 2 weeks time. And until then, bye guys!